In this episode, you'll discover how to get a balance in people's levels of dedication in the rowing club compared with what they get to race in.
Feel the grip of the oar handle, smooth yet firm in your hands. Taste the salt of your own sweat and the occasional splash of water. It's all part of the journey. Welcome to another episode of Faster Masters Rowing Radio. Each week, our host, Masters rowing coach Rebecca Caro, dives deep into the world of Masters rowing. Whether you're on the water or in the gym, join us to become a faster master. Let's go rowing.
Well, hello everybody, and it's very nice to be back again. Today I want to talk about a question that was sent in to me, and the person asked this. I would love an episode on handling varying levels of dedication to the sport in Masters clubs. How do you give both the person who wants to practice once a week and the person who trains daily a meaningful race situation? Well, isn't this normal? I'm sure if you think about your club, your racing group, you know, and you can actually think of individuals who are at both ends of that spectrum and beyond. So levels of dedication to training and practice is usually not a particular problem until it comes to racing. Because in regular workouts, if you're more experienced and you're in a crew with less experienced people, in order to give yourself a good workout, you can just work harder. You can be doing power strokes when they're paddling at half pressure, and you know you'll get a workout. So racing, though, is a whole new ball game. When it comes to racing, people who are competitive usually want to try and put the best crew together. And generally, the ideal is you are the worst person in the best crew. So you're rowing with people who are better than you. Now, in most youth and senior rowing clubs, the coach selects the lineups. They know the athletes, they know the event, they know how many races per day each person is fit enough to do. And so they choose the lineups. And this can take a lot of the emotion out of it compared with when athletes get together and they decide what they want to do, and then someone feels left out, and then there's resentment, and it can boil up. However, let's go back a step and look at the different types of race. In your racing calendar, I'll hazard a guess, there are more and less important races. So there may be local races which you treat as warm-ups for bigger events, and you may have to travel to go to a big event. So your national Masters Championships or whatever your winter long-distance race is, that is a big event and it's something that you train for. So in a training program like the one that we sell here at Faster Masters, there are typically 2, sometimes 3 peaks in a year. And the peak is how you manage your training load so that you can perform to a very high standard on race day. When it comes to those big races, big events, chances are you're not going to be doing hundreds of races. Hundreds is a joke, Some athletes are super fit and they can manage to race 5 times in a day. I do know people who can do more than that and have been successful doing more than that. But typically, most masters will tell you that they're happy to do 3 races of 1K duration in a day. If it's a long distance race, obviously you only do it once. So your small local regattas, which are of less importance in the context of the big race, are the ones where perhaps your racing priorities might be a little different. So those are possibly the events where the more experienced, fitter people race more frequently so that they get to row with people who have less practice, less fitness, perhaps less experience racing, perhaps they're newer to the sport. So they put together, let's call them crews of mixed ability. And perhaps they also get to do their own crews of people who train together more regularly and who are fitter, more experienced and stronger. Now, to get your racing priorities perfectly right, the way to do it is to race the single scull, because then you race in a boat that is entirely controlled by you and your fitness, and you have a race that is meaningful and reflects the amount of training that you've done, whether you've done more or whether you've done less. But going back to types of races, regatta organizers can also help with this. A pathway into racing for masters is often very unclear. Many federations offer a novice year where in your first year of racing, you are considered a novice and you only race against other people who themselves are novices. So the experience level and expertise is quite aligned. Then classically, you move into age group racing, where we know the age bands that go from A up to K and above. And then you are racing people of the same age as you, but your levels of experience and the number of years in the sport are vastly different. This has led Faster Masters Rowing to advocate for a racing classification that is in between novice and age group. And we have been calling it New Masters, and suggesting that regatta organizers allow people who are in their first 5 years of racing to race other people in their first 5 years of racing on a basis where there is no age differentiation. So the differentiation here is only based in your number of years in the sport. And typically the clock starts on the date of the first event that you enter, the first race that you do, and runs for 5 years. Of course, there's opportunity in the first year to do novice event and new masters event, so that you get 2 races in a day. As you get more experienced, you might do new masters events and also age group. So again, you can have multiple races in a day, and you can then see how you're progressing compared with people who are more experienced and less experienced than yourself. So types of race is an important part in this. Then we get through to preferences and compromises. So the people who train a lot, and in the questioner's words, the person who practices once a week and the person who trains daily. So aligning those two is going to be challenging. One of them will likely be fitter, and fitness counts for a lot in racing. The other is likely to be both less skilled in terms of handling the blades in the boat and less fit. Now, skill handling the blades can be retained. If the person rowed as a young person and has had some experience rowing, they still may maintain a lot of their blade work skills. You usually lose your fine motor skills first. So classically, you'll see people who mistime the catch and who are not strong enough in their core to hold good posture, good form through the mid part of the stroke and through the recovery as they get tired. Enabling compromise as part of your lineup selection, and this obviously comes back to the coaches, is one way to help give a meaningful situation experience to each of those 2 different athletes. So the person who's less fit and trains less often might be a new master, so they get a race which is aligned to people who are likely similar to themselves. And then perhaps the coach can put them into another race where they're with people who are fitter and more experienced than them. So they get, let's be a little bold here, pulled down the course by people who are stronger than them to give them some experience of racing at a higher level without being out the back door and very, very slow in that race. When it comes to the fitter person, for them, often making these compromises is far less palatable because they perceive these races as being less enjoyable, less likely to get onto the podium. Now, for myself, and this is an actual example that I've had, I have actually found that there is some satisfaction to be had in being in a mixed ability crew. Because if you do go well and you can get the best out of a crew like that, the achievement is far greater. You may not be getting a gold medal, but the satisfaction is very high. So I have had a situation where we had a quad with two experienced people, one at stroke, one at bow. I happened to be the bowman, so I was steering and I was doing the calls. And in the middle, we had three, someone who'd been rowing for about 6 years and somebody who was in their 3rd year of rowing. So a genuine mixed ability crew. And at the National Championship, Masters Championships, we snuck a bronze medal for that crew. And so our skill in judging the stroke rate that these people were capable of doing, the sort of race calls and pushes that they were able to do given their fitness, and keeping the control and the clarity of purpose and not going bananas during the race, which is often happens when you have inexperienced racers. And after we crossed the line and we had got our breath back, the person sitting in front of me turned around to me and said, "Oh my goodness, that was harder than childbirth," which has become a talisman to me and a motivation to see if we can achieve their best possible outcome. So for them, that was the best they could possibly do on that day. And it has taught them something about racing hard and racing up a standard. And the delight in getting a medal was self-evident. Now, you don't guarantee medals. And the people who are more experienced often have to work very, very hard to keep the boat speed up to try and compensate for the people who are slightly less experienced. So it's a challenging race. And you can choose that to be a motivator for yourself as part of your contribution to building the club and supporting other athletes. The flip side of that was I got to do a lot of races that were in crews where I practice regularly, where we've been racing together for several years, what I would perhaps call my priority crews. It's not ideal, and it really depends on what your club group priorities are. Worthwhile discussing with your coaches. Are you going all out for the win? In which case, the people who are in age group racing, possibly the same age group as you and train less frequently, have far less of a chance of getting through a couple of rounds of racing. Or is there a balance to be struck where in a regatta you do a bit of both if you are the more experienced person? Can you mentally set yourself up to see satisfaction in doing your own race with experienced people who train frequently and have high dedication and train daily, and also to try and deliver a good race experience for crews of mixed ability? Now, you might say absolutely not, and I refuse to compromise. And I'm sure there's a rowing club that would welcome someone like you into their fold. However, the community and friendship aspect of many masters rowing clubs means that that single-minded dedication to the racing effort is rarely the sole focus of the club. It can be, and there are some incredibly successful clubs who do that. And what you find generally is there's a group of 2 people or 4 people, and they always train together, and there's no way in for a newcomer, which means that the group is what the group is. If your club priorities are a little different than that, then a coach making selections, and perhaps the coach validates what they think against an independent person who might be your president or captain, if you have a captain, so that they can explain how they've balanced out the number of events per day per person and the balance of more and less experienced people around whatever that regatta offers, and how they have skewed it so that it facilitates both the elite, let's call them elite experienced racers, and the intermediates and the novices and the new masters to get at least one really good race in an event where they stand a chance of being competitive. By that I mean either getting on the podium or making an A final if it's a larger regatta. Now, that may not be your goal as a club, so don't let me impose my ideas on you. However, in the years that I've been doing masters racing, and I have found that this is a method that helps to bring on the less experienced people in a way that means that in future years, they advance faster towards being experienced and skilled racers than they do if you just leave them in the group which is equivalent to their own experience. Yeah, so they might be the intermediate group or whatever. And getting people skilled more quickly seems to me to be a good outcome from racing. The art of compromise, of course, is based around discussion, and preferably discussion without emotion. Now, this is very hard to do. And one of the things that I've done in the past, when I sometimes do the crew lineups for regattas, we get people to sign up in advance, so I know who's interested in going, and I know them individually, so I know their experience, I know their age. When they sign up, we invite them to set, if they have them, priority boats that they want to do. So they can sign up and say, I want to do the mixed double with so-and-so. Oh, great. That I see as their number one priority boat. And the rule of thumb that I offer is this. I explain that I try to guarantee them their number one priority. And then all of the rest of their preferences that they have expressed are secondary. And I will try and fulfill those, but they have to accept that they may well end up in a crew event, which is, let's call it suboptimal for them. And most people will accept this. They will do a race knowing that they are there rowing with people less experienced than themselves. So typically the people who are distressed by this are usually the experienced racers, and the competitive spirit generally drives them to selfish outcomes. They want what is best for them. And that is part of being a competitor and part of being a really good racer. So it is an attribute that you have to appreciate and acknowledge. And it is the most difficult one for that person to accept that they're being put in a suboptimal crew, or what they perceive as a suboptimal crew. So this is where the preferences and the compromises come in. And in general, if these, let's call them guidelines, are known and accepted through your club, your coaches who select the lineups can justify and explain their decisions. You don't have to explain your decision, but as I said earlier, running through the crews with someone sort of independent who can take a look at it and question why you've done what you've done is a good way to go. I will say that it is not ideal. It is definitely a compromise. And we have had situations where people have stormed off and thrown their metaphorical toys out of the pram because they don't want to race with people that they perceive as being, not of their standard. And that is part of rowing and part of the rowing club. And no, making people upset is really not a goal, but it is a fact of racing life that we don't always get what we want all the time. And we have to balance our priority against the opportunity, which is both the scope and framework of the regatta and the scope and framework of the athletes who are going to the event. And the club, as the umbrella entity that sits over everybody, is the entity that should say, this is our goal. This is what we want to achieve in the medium term. By that, I mean 3 to 5 years. And therefore, this year, here is what we are going to be doing. Now, if you have views on this, I would love to hear them. I know that varying levels of dedication at regattas is a really challenging topic. And there are lots of different solutions. And I'd love to hear from you if you want to tell me how your club manages to organise their crews for regattas. Till next time.
We are part of the Rowing Chat Podcast Network. Please tell your fellow rowers about the show. If you've learned just one helpful thing from today's episode, please consider supporting the show for as little as $1 per month by visiting fastermastersrowing.com/podcast.